Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the more nuanced aspects of being a pet parent with some of the most interesting people in the pet space. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Juniper podcast. We're so excited to welcome Winnie out to the show. Winnie's a professional photographer who lives in Brooklyn. She's coming out with a book called Cone of Shame, featuring 60 different dogs, including over 125 color photographs, which started as a photography series that was created to help raise awareness for rescue dogs with urgent medical needs. A portion of proceeds from the sales of the book will be donated to Animal Haven's Recovery Road Fund. And we'll have a link to the book and all of Winnie's beautiful photography work in the show notes. So Winnie, thank you so much for being on the Juniper podcast.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you so much for having me. And Haley, I'm super excited just to talk about my favorite topic, which is dogs.
Oh, yay. That's wonderful. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you got started with a career in photography? And then we'll dive into the dog and pet stuff later.
It was a very long journey. I guess I've only done photography since I was little, I guess. But I started out as a yearbook photographer in high school. That was like the first time I picked up a SLR. My dad gave me his old film camera and I learned on that. So I was mostly photographing kind of like school sports and cheerleading squad and then kids doing homework. I don't know. That's what teenagers do. But it was a great experience. I never thought it would be a career. I kind of was just doing it for fun. It really helped me, I guess, get out of my shell a little bit because I was kind of, I guess, a nerd in high school and most of my life. And I just didn't know what my way was. So I think, looking back on that time, it was the beginning of me figuring out something about myself and kind of learning how to socialize in the world. So it was a great way for me to just meet people. And I think it still is that. So I went from high school to studying advertising at Boston University. So I ended up with a degree in communications. And all during that time, I still did photography for fun. So I did photojournalism classes in college, and I just took it as electives, and I audited classes, and I would just hang out in the darkroom all the time. So I think some stuff in life you kind of gravitate towards, but again, I still never thought of it as a career. I just didn't think it was something you could do to, make a living. Eventually, I got an internship with a commercial photographer because I was hanging out in the darkroom all the time and someone brought up the opportunity. And from that internship, I kind of realized oh, this is a job, something that I thought was really fun. And I guess I still think it's fun. I just was kind of floored by the idea of doing it as work. So I went from interning to then assisting, studio managing, and then moving to New York where I did a lot of digital teching, which is the computer digital camera person on set. And then I eventually quit assisting because I got fairly comfortable doing that. And then I launched my own career. And it was kind of starting from scratch again because as a assistant, I was freelancing and I had to go find my clients. And then as a photographer, I kind of had to take a pay cut and build my branding again and just kind of let everybody know, now I'm a photographer. So that took some time. And then I signed with the agent and here I am.
Wow. We're going to link your website in the show notes. If people go check it out, you're going to see that. I think Winnie is being very humble. Your career is incredible and really inspiring. And we love having people on the show who are somehow connected to the pet world, but also just doing really inspiring, kick-ass things themselves. So it's exciting to see how much you've done. But your photography, so when people go look at the site, they're going to see that you shot everything from people to food to dogs. And new book that you have coming out, Cone of Shame, is showing off dogs. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into photographing pets and even just about this project? How did this get started?
So the pet thing was similar to the way photo was always floating in my sphere. I think when I was still assisting, I started photographing dogs in my community, basically. I was shooting film and shooting medium format with this Mamiya RZ. It's like a kind of famous portrait studio camera. And I wanted to represent dogs in a way that at that time, it was many, many years ago, I just didn't really see represented, which was capturing dogs in a way that made them feel more regal, more kind of like showing their place in modern society. I think I had seen a lot of like goofy photos and cute photos of dogs and dogs as pets. And I think, there's been this big wave of turning our dogs into our babies and just the way that they become a much bigger part of the family. And even just, when I grew up, our family dog lived outside. And I think as an adult, having a dog that lived in my house with me and like shares our bed, like all of that stuff is just a big change. So I saw it as kind of a societal change and something that I wanted to document. And I think it's something that has followed again for all the years I've been doing editorial and commercial work, photographing people. I've always been interested in dogs and other animals, but mostly dogs. So I think even before I had my own dog, people were like, oh, she's just that crazy dog lady who's like poking around at dog parks. And I was like, oh, you're not supposed to hang out at a dog park if you didn't bring your own dog. So I don't want to be a weirdo. So we eventually got our own dog just to be less strange.
Oh, I love that so much. And the sort of reconciliation of like the photography being this underlying passion throughout your life, even as you thought that you were maybe going to do other things, got that degree in communications, and the dogs also sort of being a different underlying passion and then getting to bring them together in this book. I think that is so incredibly cool. And your work captures the dogs so well. Like the cone of shame idea is just so much fun. How did Cone of Shame turn into this real book that's coming out?
It's another thing like about, I guess, the way my brain works is usually things float in my head for a while and then it feels sort of like I grabbed the idea or something like that. So even when I was, I don't know, a teenager, I would just have like words that would imprint in my head and then eventually I would act on it. So who knows where it comes from. Same thing happened with the Cone of Shame, where I kind of just had this image of the dog wearing the cone stuck in my brain for a long time. And so I knew I wanted to do something with it. I just didn't know what. And I think I was working, a lot building my editorial and commercial career. And I think I was sitting around with my studio manager and trying to figure out like, oh, what's the next big fun project we'll work on. And so we, sat down and kind of iterated. Well, we had a few ideas, but just like everything else, we narrowed it down and we were like, let's work out this Cone of Shame idea. And we made a bunch of different mood boards and kind of figured out what the visual of it would be. And then I think the other piece of the puzzle that came together was one, I met Marianne Morvan, who creates all the cones. So we met on an editorial shoot, and I think meeting someone who had kind of like the style that I was looking for, it felt like a really good fit. So I got her on board to work on the project with me. And from a personal side, one of the the first dog that me and my now husband have together, she passed away suddenly of cancer. So I think a lot of things kind of came together where I was trying to work on a personal project and do something visually fun. Then on the personal side, me and my husband were dealing with a lot of loss and grief. And I'm sure like a lot of people have lost pets because most of us sadly, well, gladly we live longer, but sadly we outlive them. So it's one of those things where we were really, I don't know, traumatized by losing our pet Tartine, and the new book, Cone of Shame, is dedicated to her. So you'll kind of read her story in my introduction. And I wanted to find a way to kind of give back and transform maybe some of that loss into something more positive. So I put it all together in a way, and now the Cone of Shame Project helps to raise funds for Animal Haven's Recovery Road Fund, which is basically rescue dogs who have urgent medical needs. And I think when we were going through Tartine's, she had throat cancer. So when we were going through the cancer treatment, we realized, like, oh my gosh, these medical costs are skyrocketing and they're really intense. So I saw that there was a need out there to get money to people. And I thought it would be hopefully helpful to others, but it was just like, it kind of broke my heart to think about someone having to figure out, like, oh, do we treat our dog or do we have to put them to sleep? Like, nobody wants to sit around making that decision. It's kind of awful. So it shouldn't be made based on finances, at least. So this was sort of a way to give back and, again, like, make my pain turn into something a little bit more hopeful and better.
It's so nice to have a balance of this. So we're on a podcast. Nobody can see the photos. The photos are so joyous and like styled. And I guess you should describe them, but the cones themselves are all designed in this really beautiful way. And so it's great that you have something so fun and joyous that came out of something so hard and sad, but now it's going to feed back to help other people. That's so wonderful that you tied that all together. And I think that's a really nice legacy for Tartine. I always think about, if they're not with us forever, what can we sort of do for their legacy? We've talked about that a little bit on other podcasts. I see these themes coming out, but dogs come into our lives, change our lives. Then can we give something back for their memory? So that's wonderful that you're doing that. Can you describe for people who haven't seen these photos yet, how did you come up with these both designs with and you mentioned you collaborated with who designed them and everything like that?
Yes, of course. How to describe a photo it's in words is always difficult, but I think there's definitely some inspiration from fashion photography. So we kind of conceived the whole thing as being a bit more abstract. I wanted to see the dogs as not only portraits of dogs, but also seeing them as kind of sculptures and works of art. So each concept had to be put together almost the same way you would do a fashion shoot or any kind of like stylized portrait shoot, which is we had to create a custom color palette, figure out each background. A lot of them were custom painted to kind of represent all the different types of, I don't know, I guess the spectrum of animals out there. And each cone is uniquely made from different materials. So there's eggshells and makeup sponges and candy buttons and wires and cables. There's silken flowers, like everything. So it kind of became this game of looking at things around the world and being like, could that be a cone? Could that be a cone? And it was really fun for both me and Marianne Morvan is the designer of the cones, and she handmade each one. Because dogs come in so many different sizes, they also had to be like, we had to cast the dogs and then make the cones. You can't just make like a one size fits all type of cone. So we would get all the measurements of each dog. And I love working with dogs because they have like such a variety of shape, size, and color and fur tone. Just as animals in the animal world, I don't think there's always so much variety, or maybe it's just because we see dogs all the time. But whatever it is, I find it really fun. Like, it's a fun challenge. But you think about, a Pomeranian, and like the cone we made for the Pomeranian's like this big. And then we would have a Great Dane on set and need a much larger backdrop. And what's funny about the book is like you really can't tell the scale of the dogs because they're all shot in studio. So me and everyone who worked on the shoots, we know like, oh, that one was huge, but it's like you have side by side these giants and these little ones and these medium-sized ones, and they're all kind of equalized on the page. And yeah, it's very fun. And we kind of in capturing the dogs, would do a mix of getting their personality to come through, but also I loved capturing these moments that were more abstract. So we had, for example, a Chinese crested dog who, when her cone was on, it was made out of these like thin foam strips. And she literally was really light on her feet. So she like dances in circles. And so the resulting images are so like, I don't know, almost like watching a ballerina. Like there's such an interesting type of shape and movement. And then we would get like the cover dog, the English bulldog, who's like super cute and sweet, but their energy was completely different. Like you can imagine, she kind of plodded around and they can't jump or like dance. So as a photographer, I really enjoy all those differences. I think humans do have that difference too, but I think in working with dogs, it's just fun to see like what each one can do. And some would come on set and they would roll around, and some would just have really funny personalities, and some of them can like sing, which you can't see in the photos. But it's like each one of them would have a really unique kind of thing they could do. And I think it's just fun to figure out.
Here at Juniper, we make content for your favorite pet brands. We're 100% women owned and operated, and you can hire us to create your articles, blogs, videos, email marketing campaigns, lead generation guides, and more. Visit us at www.juniperpet.co to learn more. Thanks for listening.
I think that the individuality within dogs as a species is fascinating, and you're totally right. My current understanding is that dogs are the most diverse species, like to be the same species and have that range of shapes and sizes. And the like Great Dane Chihuahua or Great Dane Pomeranian example is always my favorite, because when you just picture that, it so clearly illustrates like these animals are the same species. They're all domestic dogs, and yet there's this huge range, not only of physical traits, but also of the personalities. And I love that you're talking about both here. Like you're looking at a photograph on the page, and it's fundamentally visual input, but through that you can still glean some insight into those personality bits. And it makes me wonder if one of the reasons that we love dogs so much, and what you were talking about earlier with, kind of this shift of like having an outdoor dog as a child versus now having a dog who is sort of your baby and sleeps in your bed. I think that in some ways they help remind us of our own individuality and all of the diversity within ourselves that is just so wonderful to embrace. I'm so excited about the book. Speaking of photographing dogs and, how much you love doing it, what are some of the biggest differences between photographing dogs versus like food and people and these other projects that you've done? And what do you love best about it?
There's a lot of technical things that are more challenging with dogs from a photographic standpoint. So one is they move a lot more. They may or may not listen to direction, and they may or may not do what you want them to do. They're often on a time limit. So even the most well-trained dogs, we typically don't have them on set for more than a couple hours. Like I think some of them can be on set all day with like breaks, like the professional ones, but I think there's regulations and stuff about working with animals. Like in the movies, they'll have like 5 dogs playing one dog. And I think it's the same with babies. I was like, oh my God, they're all like quadruplets or something, or, getting through those movies. So there is some similarity between working with babies, toddlers, and dogs. But there's a certain point where like people, like little toddlers, can take more direction than a dog would. So a lot of stuff is really understanding working with animals and understanding their energy. Like I guess there is similarity in that that's also how you work with people. But I think knowing what the challenges are going into a shoot is always really important, and laying it out for whoever it is you're working with. So we always try to set ourselves up for success. And I think the more you work with, a specific topic, the more you know how to anticipate, like, oh, this might happen. Or I documented the Halloween dog parade in New York for many years, and I'd set up this studio outside, and then there would be like hundreds of dogs would come. Like, it was crazy. But I learned early at that time, because I think I was still, working with dogs, but still kind of getting into it, that of course, like, if one dog pees on your backdrop, all of the dogs will pee on it, which makes sense, like owning a dog. So there's just certain challenges that you're like, okay, let's try to make sure that, nobody pees right here, because then it's actually a whole day of picking up pee or whatever. So there is that. The dogs will accidentally pee and poop on your set, and I think people don't do that. But other than that, I think the best part about working with dogs is, like, not only do they make me happy, but they make everyone in the room happy. So even when working, on shoots where I really love capturing people with their own pets, because it really opens them up and kind of like breaks down the barriers they might have of being photographed. And there's just something really great about that like you can have this wonderful connection between two creatures or whatever's going on, and it sort of makes us forget how self-conscious we are about being in front of the camera or whatever it is. So I think I like that they bring that to the photograph, that you kind of can get a more honest moment out of it.
I'm just going to say, one of my favorite Instagram trends is this idea of take more photos with your dog. Like, so many of us pet parents just have camera rolls with thousands of photos of our dogs. And it's so special to capture those moments, like you were just saying, where we're actually interacting with them and you're capturing that relationship.
So, question for you is, what can average people do to take better pictures of their dog?
This is a very good question. I was like, the good part is the new phones are really, great cameras. So that already makes your life a little easier. I think one of the main things I always tell people is to get lower to the ground and look at your dog eye level. That's one of the main ways that, if you think when we're photographing people, we're looking at each other eye level. And so the reason most photographs, they look like they're from our POV, but then the dog's really far away and it's not a great angle on them. So if you really want to see them looking more majestic, then get down low, but it can hurt your back. So I'm like, that was one of my complaints about working with dogs, is like, I'm always on the floor photographing. And after a while, you're just like, oh my gosh, my back. But anyways, the other thing is, I think having a lot of treats, if your animal, pet, dog is treat oriented, always helps. I request that for my shoots that the dog knows how to sit and stay. So I think one of the things would be to just train your dog and get them to, be able to do those two commands will really help. And it's actually really, like, my dog loved this training because she got so much string cheese out of it. But I would have my current dog, Clementine, sit, and our trainer had taught us this when we were like teaching her how to be a better dog. And every time we fed her, you have her sit in her place, and then you slowly walk away, and she has to stay. She doesn't get to eat until you say, okay. And that training, like, you extend how far you walk back, and you get her to stay longer and longer. And so Clementine, really got good at that after like years. Maybe some dogs might get it in a day, but whatever. Years of training and reinforcing that at meal times and with treats. And now she's like so good at staying in place. And that's very helpful for photographs. And the other thing is just like, I think having your camera kind of ready, which is why phones are very useful, as we always have it in our pocket. But I think it's just recognizing and capturing the moment when it's there is always helpful. But yeah, if you really want to take like a portrait, then I think minimize distractions, try to find a nice backdrop that isn't too busy, and get your light in a flattering way on the dog. So it's usually like, I like kind of a side 3/4 light, but so put them, the easiest thing is put them near a window and get that pretty daylight, and also turn off all the incandescent lights because they create different color temperatures.
Those are such good actionable tips. Thank you so much for sharing with everybody how to do that. Tell us a little bit about Dog Friendly New York, your previous book, and how that got started. Is there going to be a trilogy of dog books?
More and more dog books. I hope so. So let's see. Dog Friendly New York is a guidebook that I created with this magazine called Foreign Sons, which is like a dog and culture magazine. So I spent years contributing to the magazine. Then I became good friends with the founder of the magazine. And so me and her had talked about like wanting to do a dog project together or like a book project. And so we created a series of guides. It was actually, we did New York and London at the same time. And I did all the photography for New York. And what ended up happening was we had this grand idea to like do Berlin, do all these cities, and go live in the cities, for like a month or two at a time and do the photo shoots. And it sounded wonderful. And what really happened is right when I think we signed with a publisher on the book deal. And right around then, the pandemic hit in 2020. So basically, all of our ideas to like move around kind of filtered away. And we were like, okay, we still want to make these books, but we have to figure out a way to do it, not with us traveling. So I ended up doing all the New York stuff. We hired people in London to photograph that. We had different editors working in both places to do all the copywriting. And it was a major group effort, which ultimately worked out great. Like, I'm really proud of what we created. It also ended up being a ton of work, which I think is the lesson in any bookmaking, is that they're all like tons of work. So Cone of Shame took about 2 years to make. Dog Friendly New York also took about 2 years to make. Like, it's years of time. So you have to really love what you're doing. You have to be getting something out of it, because it's usually not like you're going to make a ton of money. Of course, we all wish we can become best-selling authors and whatever, but it's much more about, creating something that you're proud of, that lives in the world. And I think just like photography or anything that we create as an art form, it's like if you can get something out in the world that other people appreciate, then that's what I get out of it. And just being able to bring things to a broader audience. I think that's what's fun about books. And I don't know, I have a toddler now, so I think we spend a lot of time reading, even, much more than I did before having a toddler. And I think there's just this like love of the printed matter and enjoyment that I'm really happy to participate in. And I think as much as I love digital media, I really will always love books and magazines, and just creating beautiful objects is fun. So yes, I'm like, Dog Friendly New York came out of a fun project we wanted to do that became, a bit of a beast of a project. And yeah, that's what it is. But it's basically a guidebook for people in New York. And then there's one in London. And if you have a dog, it's like all of our favorite places to go and things to do. And I think we purposely didn't pick your typical like dog place. So we tried to find places that we would want to go anyways that happen to allow dogs. So that was sort of the ethos in finding our favorite spots. And both me and Marta love art and design and all that stuff. So it's sort of like, just because you have a dog doesn't mean you can't enjoy beautiful things and great food and all that stuff. It was like, how do you do both of the things you love at once?
Integration of our dogs into the lives that we already want to live. I think that that's such a cool thing to explore. One last question for you, if we've still got time for it. You've done so much in your career. I mean, you go to your website, you've been featured in all of these massive publications. Your work is incredible. You have these 2 books. We just heard that maybe, hopefully, there will be a future dog book someday. That's a lot, right? That is so exciting and so cool. But how do you personally measure success for yourself?
That's also a good question. I feel like I need to go on a vacation and figure that out. But I do think success at this point in my career is much more about doing projects that I care about and love than working with specific brands or being published in a specific magazine. I think it is all about I think working on personal projects is great because you don't have a client, and it is all about creating what you want to create for nobody else, basically. And I think having the opportunity and ability to do that is what I love, and also being able to touch the lives of other people. So I think it's just a mix of both of those things. I want to create work that I care about and that I would make even if the planet was empty, which I hope it won't be. But you kind of have to think that way, which is what would you be doing if we were sitting in the middle of the forest and nobody was around? So that's what I want to have time and space to do. And working professionally as a photographer allows me to do that. So I think right now I have a really great balance with being able to love what I do and also have the time to explore ideas in my spare time of what I love doing and give back to the dog community. And I think just bringing people together, we're having a launch party for the Cone of Shame book soon in New York on September 15th, and it's open to the public. And I've been spending months, planning this event, and I'm really excited to just get all these people in a room. And I think, again, we spend so much time on our devices now that I really value human connection and dog connection, but just that in-person thing that I'm so glad the pandemic is over for now, and just being able to all be in a room together is really special to me. So yeah, making weird stuff when I have time to is what I want to do.
That is wonderful. And I was thinking back to when you said younger version of you in the dark room. I bet if you had told her that you would, as an adult, would be a professional photographer, making a living off of this and getting to hang out with dogs and photograph them for books, as well as all of these other amazing projects you get to work on, she would probably be really proud. And I think that's really inspirational to other people who want to go into art and build a life for themselves around it. It's just really cool what you've done. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. Can you tell everybody where to go to see your website, where to get the book, how to get in touch with you and see all your work?
Yes. So my website is winniewow.com, and you can find more about the book at coneofshamebook.com. And then on Instagram, I'm Winnie Wow. And I think that's it. That's my world.
Great. Thank you so much, Winnie. It was great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It was really fun.
That's all for today. To learn more and discover the best handpicked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.